Okay. Okay, so firstly, a little bit of history. My first hobby was wood carving, not wood turning. And I didn't actually go to any courses, and I hadn't got any books. So I basically tried it and made a lot of mistakes. And then I did find some books and hopefully improved a little bit. And just as a few examples, these are some things that I did many years ago. So now something called antique and an eagle. The piece of wood in that shape, by the way, I'm just a bad photographer. And so I had a background in engineering, and I wanted to expand the wood carving side of the hobby. So I thought maybe I should go into turning, and the idea was to turn bowls and then enhance them in some way. So I went out on one bright day and bought a lathe, like you do. And the sort of thing that I wanted to do, I don't know if anybody remembers Jer Starbuck, but she did demonstrate at our club some years ago, and she did these lovely bowls with the pierced work, and I really like those. So this is my go at one of the rare sort of bowls, and it was the sort of thing that I had in mind, shall we say, when I started. I've also done the splats of chairs. So this one's just got a Celtic knot design in it. And this was a little chair that I made for my little nephew. So it's a miniature chair, not a great big one. Okay, so this just as a general kind of description of the sort of things that you can think about with carving. Carving really should enhance whatever you're doing rather than not. And the turning should be the best you can do, because the carving certainly won't save a poorly turned item. And if you're going to because you may need to leave a bit of wood on somewhere, which you're then going to carve off or shape or do something with. And it's always a good idea sometimes if you're trying something for the first time to practice on another bit of wood, a bit of scrap wood or something, because you don't want to waste your best pieces. You should really have a think about, if you're going to carve into a piece of wood, you need to think about what it's going to look like when it's finished. And if you get a really beautifully figured piece of wood, and then you carve into it, probably you won't see either the figuring or the carving. So it's the sort of thing to, if you want a nice carving, look at a plane of wood, and you'll probably come up with a better result. Sorts of woods that you might try: lime wood, fruit woods, the apple was a bit off earlier, kind of ideal. Holly's nice white wood, and you can always colour it afterwards if you want to. And some other suitable woods, walnuts, oaks, sycamores, mahoganies, any of those. A lot with the thing with the fruit woods is that they do have like an oil in the wood, so they are nice to carve. And if you try some other woods, mahogany particularly is a bit grainy and it can split off when you're carving. So you have to be a little more careful. Finishing is pretty much the same as you would do for turning, but certainly with sanding, you should be very, very circumspect about your sanding, because having put some nice crisp edges on with your carving, you don't really want to take them off with the sanding. Yeah. Sharpening tools, you need really very keen edges to cut effectively, and also that imparts a good finish to the work. Don't put carving tools anywhere near a grinder if you can at all help it. They're only high carbon steel rather than high speed steel, so they tend to glue quite easily. Use an oil stone or a diamond sharpener, something like that, and then strop it on a leather with some jeweler's rouge or something along those lines to get a really keen edge on it. I have seen some systems that you can put onto the lathe, which is like a shaped board with material on it, which you then put the rouge on, and you then can put a keen edge on. But I've never actually gone to the trouble of buying one. Use the tools carefully and protect the edges if at all possible, because you just spend a long time putting a nice edge on. The sorts of tools that you can buy are flat, straight carving tools, skew, just the same as the wood turning one. Gouges with different sweeps. So something that looks like a U shape would be a quicker sweep than something which is almost flat, which would be described as a slow sweep. And you can get viners, which are I'm not really quite sure how you do that, to pronounce those, fluters, which are really very U-shaped. And of course you can get V tools, different angles, and you can also get carving tools which are shaped, so backward leaning, forward leaning, fish-tailed. There are two main patterns, the London pattern and the Sheffield list, which are usually in numbers, so you get a number with a width. So you might buy a number 8 gouge with 15 millimeters wide, and that's usually the way you buy them, or you can buy them in sets. These are some sets that I've got, which I bought over the years. The set on the top left here is the very first set of tools that I bought, and that's probably, I dare say, 35, 40 years ago, and I'm still using them, and they're still almost as good as the day I bought them. So they certainly don't wear down very quickly. This was a set I bought at the club, the American ones. Somebody was selling them off very reasonably, I thought. This sort of handle that's on here, which is the palm tools, are literally used like that. So in your palm, if you want to hit it, you need to buy something with a handle like this on it. Hitting is quite useful sometimes. You want to remove a fair bit of wood. As you can see, this one is quite a wide, that's about 2 inches, and is quite a slow gouge. It's not, there's not much of a curve in it. This setup in the top right hand corner is a flex cut system that I bought not so, a couple of years ago now, and they're excellent tools. The amusing bit is that they supply plasters with them, which when you realise how sharp they are, you probably realise it's a good idea. The other kind of accessories that you can get, this vice on the right hand side here is one I bought from ACCESSORY that you can actually put your lathe chuck onto. So there's a spindle which you can just about see going through there that's got your thread on it, and you can buy various threads. And you just, if you're turning something on the lathe, you just take it off and screw it on, do some carved work, which I was doing with this waved carving. The other types of things you can get, files, microplanes, riflers, needle files, knives, mallets, punches. There's all kinds of gear that you can get for carving, and the all-important mallet. This is the only bought one that I've ever had. All the others are homemade. And when you've got a lathe, you can do that sort of thing. So that's a very handy feature of being a wood turner. You can also buy power tools. You've probably seen some of these for sale. Dremels have been around for years. Some kind of flexi drive is very useful. You can get power carving tools, which I've never used, but people say they're really very good, which is basically those tools you just saw, but fixed to a machine that does all the hard work for you, really. Kind of ruins the fun as far as I'm concerned, but hey, everybody to their own. You can use burrs, cutters, drills, diamond, carbide, Duragrit, all those kinds of things. Any means you like to remove the wood. Even dentist bits. For that pierced work you saw earlier, I actually used dental bits, and they work very well. They need to be new, if at all possible. And if there are any dentists out there, I'm sure you've got a few lying around that you could use. Arbortex, you've got one of those, Martin, I know, and there are probably quite a few other people who've got them. I've seen recently somebody using a ball gouge using an Arbortex, and that looked quite amazing, I have to say. It almost made me want to go and get one. Types of carving. In the real carving world, you get in the round, low relief, high relief. Hopefully some of you have seen some of the sort of carvings you get in National Trust properties. There's some really beautiful things out there. Lettering, decorative marks, chips, shaping, piercing, you name it, really. And you can do all that on your turned items if you want to. And again, there are some really very good exponents of all this type of work out there. Mark Sanger being one of them. I'm sure some of you have seen him or know about him. Okay, so process. If you're doing a wood turning, you're then going to carve into, leave additional wood when necessary, mark out a design, do some rough carving, keep marking on the detail as you go, because you'll soon lose where you are otherwise, and you just slowly work towards the final design. You can always take off more, but you can't put it back on again. That's a bit more difficult. Be aware of the grain direction and be prepared to change the direction of cut. And quite often you find that cutting across the grain works as well as anything. It doesn't tend to necessarily put a very good finish on, but you can always sort that later. But as for just taking wood away, that works. Safety. Now, having spent a long time sharpening your tools to a very, 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 very keen edge, try and keep both of your hands on the wood turning tool, on the carving tool, sorry. And, you know, basically you won't cut your fingers if you've got your hands on the tool itself. Don't carve towards yourself, keep the tool sharp, because if they're not, you have to push harder and that's when you get problems. Wear some sturdy shoes, because you can always drop one. And definitely don't try and catch one if you do. And if you're carving on the lathe, make sure the spindle's locked if you can, and the power's off. And if you use power tools, wear eye protection, dust extraction mask, all the rest of it. All the usual PPE, really, to keep yourself safe. These are some examples of mostly other people's work, I'm glad to say. I think this one was at a AWGB stand, as probably that one as well. These two, sadly, are mine. As you can, with this one, that was pyrographed as well, and it was basically because it had cracks in it. And this was a way of putting some additional features on, shall we say. But I thought it came out quite well in the end. This is again one of mine, but it's based on a carving that we saw at Whistling Wood in London. And I think this might have been one of the ones from Whistling Wood. And that was definitely Whistling Wood. That's a Mark Sanger, which I'm sure some of you might recognise. Again, one of his lovely pieces. This almost goes back to that original one that I showed you with the pierced work. So it's turned something very thin and then cut out a shape, which is really quite interesting. Now, that's really everything I need to say about carving, really. But I thought it might be interesting to show a project which was a very, very small amount of wood turning, but mostly carving. But it does give you more of an idea about perhaps the carving technique itself. So this was somebody asked me to make this for quite a young lad, and so I looked up pictures online, as you do, because I'd never watched the program, and I thought the easiest way to do was kind of create something in plasticine, of give me a rough idea of where I was going. So this was my first attempt at thinking about what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. Again, when you're thinking about doing something like this, it's like this. You need to give an anchor for the hand here, because it would be too brittle otherwise, be too delicate. Bearing in mind a small child's going to fiddle about with it. And the same with this one. The idea was to anchor the hand, because otherwise, what do you do with them? So the real sort of thing was working out what to do and how I need to carve it. I then thought, well, it's basically a round thing. So I did actually turn the basic shape, but I did it by imagining where the shoulders and things like that were going to be, just turning bits away. Now, you could do this any way you wanted to. You could just carve it away, or you just use a knife or whatever you wanted. But this was just a way of kind of helping you on my way to the final product, as it were. So this is where we're just pretty much, that's off the lathe, and I've just done a little bit of carving. You can see I've started drawing some of the features, and as I was saying, as you carve, you carve those away, so you have to continually put them back. Where his knees are going to go, where his feet are going to go, where the hand's going to go, and slowly move on and get further and further down. So the fingers start off quite fat, and then you think, okay, I need to thin those off, and you just keep going, and eventually you get down to where you want it. With this particular one of the biggest features was for it to have eyes, and making eyes is quite interesting, but basically a white wood and a black wood to give you the eye and the pupil. So you more or less carve a hole into the to make the socket, and glue a white wood post in, carve the shape of the eye, drill a hole, and then you make up a pupil, tiny piece of wood. And the only reason it's glued to this particular block is to give you something to hold on to while you're gluing it in. So that's then glued into the hole, and when it's dry, you just cut it off and then finish the pupil. This is moving a bit, so he's got his nose, which, because of you want the grain running down the nose, so the most sensible thing for me to do with this was to actually fit it in, like the eyes really, rather than try and carve it out of the solid piece of wood, because it would have been so brittle. The grain would have been going through this way, and it would have just snapped off at the first when somebody tried to play with it or whatever they did. So when you think you're almost there, I took him off the base, so you can just see a little bit of the base on the bottom, saw it off. Whoops. And then just as a finishing feature, I actually used the base that he was standing on here to make a little hat for it to sit on. So you could do this kind of carving on a bowl, but you'd actually do it in sort of 2D rather than 3D. So you could just do something looking straight on thing rather than in 3D. It just gives an idea of the actual carving process. Okay, so we're down to any questions. Nobody's had any so far, which is a bit disappointing.
Peter, just a quick one. How long would that have taken you, the stick man, from start to finish?
Probably a couple of weeks, actually. Probably. I mean, you know, I'm not out there 8 hours a day, but over a couple of weeks, probably. But in hours terms, I don't know. I mean, I've carved things like a bear in the round, and that took a good month of, and that was about, I think I actually recorded that was something like 70 hours, 75 hours or something of carving. But that might be because I'm particularly slow. It's a bit like wood turning. I'm not a particularly quick wood turner. So, you know, I don't tend to worry about making things in half an hour. If it takes 2 or 3 days, it takes 2 or 3 days. So,
there's one interesting thing happening soon. I think Mike Davies, who organises Record Power live demos, he's a trained carver, and I think they had a vote the other day to go on Record Power and actually demo some carving. But if that does occur, I'll send some information out to Alan, and people can follow up if they want to and watch it. I've certainly found some of the Record Power demos very, very good. I've learnt a lot.
Yeah, I think they're on very odd times for me, so I don't think I've watched any, but mainly because they're just not on good times. It's a pity they don't record them and put them on that you can watch later.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they do about that, but certainly, I mean, some of them are 10:30, which I've watched. Because it's worldwide, of course, they vary the times.
Has anybody else got any other questions?
Peter, have you got any particular view on, I mean, you've got an Axminster carver's vice, I think you said.
Yes.
Was that a conscious choice over the Simon Hope one, or was that
well, the thing I liked about that particular one was the fact that you could put the chuck on it, and that was the really thing that drove me to buy it. But yeah, they're all good. I think it depends on what you want to use it for. I mean, I've carved with that. You also get a spindle with a plate on the end, so you can just screw blocks onto it. So you know, it's not just for the chuck. So you've got other uses as well, and I've used that as well, and it's very good because you can put it in any position you like, and it seems to take a bit of punishment because I have hit things on it. So, because you know, when you're carving with a mallet, you don't want it moving around the place, so it has to be able to lock up very, very well. There's all sorts of systems out there, really.
Hi, Peter. When you want to have a nice pattern, a design, which you can't, I mean, I can't think of designs myself, but I see lots of designs to steal from other people. How do you, have you got a good way of transferring the design to the wood?
I've never found a particularly good way of doing it, because some people say use tracing paper, and I can't see how that works very well. So I've generally just done it by hand, just sort of drawn it on and kept drawing. You know, you have to have something for it that you're working from, which was the idea of that mannequin. At least it gives you something as a reference.
Yes.
And then, or photographs, drawings, anything you can use really, and then just keep drawing it on. Right. So unfortunately not. I mean, there might be some good ways. I think Jer Starbuck used to use paper that she used to Xerox a pattern onto it, and then use acetone. So you hold it and you put the acetone on, and it leaves the black actually comes off the paper. But I think that's that's an old-fashioned printing machine.
Yes, it works with with the
Yeah, it doesn't work with the ones that we all use in these days.
But there are some ways that you can transfer inkjet printing as well, I believe.
Yeah, I've not seen that. Could be useful, but you'd need a flat surface. Or a fairly flat surface.
Peter, question for you regarding the perforating bowls and rims and things. Jer Starbuck has a very professional dentist drill which runs at a much higher speed with carbide cutters and things. I've tried it with a flexible drive, probably running at about, I don't know, 25,000 RPM. I think I was running somewhere about 200,000 RPM.
Yeah.
Got a clean cut. Have you tried doing a piercing with one of those type of things?
Well, high speed one.
Well, with a lower speed one.
Well, I've only got a Dremel, so mine would be a lower speed. And even with that, I found that it was quite easy to burn the wood.
Yeah, and also you get a more ragged cut.
Yeah.
A lot more cleaning up.
The dental burns were very good because they're not too abrasive. They're not too. They haven't got a really sharp edge on. I mean, I've used some of these carbide ones, and they're wicked things.
Don't feel like it when you're sitting in this chair, though, does it? Dentist drills, they're very aggressive. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
So, Peter, you in your health and safety thing, you said you mustn't try and catch your tools if you drop them.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried that?
Well, catching them.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, when a tool rolls towards the end of a table, your first instinct is to try and catch the darn thing. And I've actually got quite good reflexes, so I probably could if I tried. But I generally don't. It's not a good plan.
Okay, he's not going to admit to having cut himself while he's carving, so I'm not going to catch him out on that, am I, guys? So I do have a more serious question. Actually, I'm a great fan. I'm a great fan of carving in general because I've seen a lot of it in European churches and in English churches. So it clearly historically was something that was maybe much more of a profession than it is now. Much in the way as wood turning was. So there's a beautiful church up at Chiddickbury near St Albans, if anybody knows that. And it used to be that the Marples family, do you remember Marples department stores and furniture and so on? In the late 19th, early 20th century, they owned the estate up at Chiddickbury. And of course, they fitted out the church. And so if any of you want to see some really nice carving, there's a really beautiful lectern there for the Bible to stand on in the form of an angel. I have no idea who it was carved by, but clearly somebody important because it's chained. It's chained down with a very, very thick steel chain to hold it in place so that people won't run away with it. But I was going to ask you this, Peter. Have you seen any carving in Hertfordshire, because most of us, I think, are based in and around Hertfordshire, that you'd recommend for people to go and see, maybe for a weekend trip out?
That's a hard one. Well, in most of the stately homes, you tend to find some really nice carving. I mean, some of them have got Grin Gibbons carvings in them. I think Belton House, which is not exactly in Hertfordshire, I think it's a bit further up north, but that's got some Grinling Gibbons in it. Beautiful stuff. And I think some of the ones down in London as well have certainly got it. And they're, when you get close to them, they're fabulous things. I mean, you can't imagine how someone carved, really. Well, I can't. And actually, if they ever start doing some of these things like Hatfield House again, there are some carvers out there. They're very good. So you can see some bits around and about. But yeah, certainly churches. I always look in the choirs in churches, because usually they used to carve little faces down on by the seats. I think York has got some very good ones. So,
oh yes, when you lift the seat up, yes, there's a name for those, isn't there? Does anybody know it?
I think Chillickberry is having an open day soon. They're having a craft fair in the next release. It was planning to have one, and it's very worthwhile going there to have a look around the estate. And they open up all the barns, and they get lots of artisan people down there as well, showing their wares. So it's a good day out for people that want to be inspired by ideas that are coming. And I think the last time we went, it was free to get in. So it's a cracking experience.
Where was that, Malcolm?
The estate has a craft fair.
No, which one?
In St Albans, one on the Harpenden Road. Harpenden from St Albans, out to Harpenden.
Yeah, it's in July.
Yeah, so it's well worth going down if people are interested in being inspired by some of the things that that particular estate has got on offer.
Yeah, great.
I agree with that. And I was walking up there recently, and they put the signs up for that weekend. Can't remember the dates off the top of my head, but they're anticipating that it's definitely going ahead. The interesting fact about Chiddickbury, the lady who lives there now is Stanley Kubrick's widow, Christiana Kubrick, and she's the artist who runs the Chiddickbury Art Fair. So she's the main sponsor of the whole thing, and she currently owns the estate. I think she's possibly in her 80s, possibly 90s now. But if you do go, she's always in her own little tent. She has her own exclusive little tent, and it's worth going in there and seeing if you can have a chat with her, because she's a remarkable woman.
The name of those little seats in the choir is called misericords. There's some really quite famous ones. One's at Exeter Cathedral, and it's actually an elephant. And it's evident when you look at it that the carver had never seen an elephant.
I'm going to try and show you a carving which a friend of mine did. He's the one who introduced me to Hue and Pine. I'm going to try. Can you see this pitcher plant?
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. He used to live in Leverstock Green. He used to work at the College of Building, and a really, really clever man and clever carver. But that's out of Hue and Pine. That's the one I use as well. Beautiful.
Please, Richard again. I went to an exhibition at Sandown Park many years ago when they used to have a woodworking show. And there was a competition for carvers, and the specification was make anything you like from a 5-inch cube of lime, because lime was shown to be one of the easiest woods to carve. And one of the items was somebody had made a lady's handkerchief laid over something, and it showed the perforated edge, and it looked just like you could pick it up and blow your nose on it. It was that good. And being lime, pure white colour, it was beautiful. But lime, I think, would probably be the easiest one for a beginner, because of the lack of grain and the softness of the timber. I think teak might be pushing it a bit for a beginner.
Yeah, teak's very awkward, but lime, as you say, is one of the best woods. It's
I've
nice
not done it, but that's what I've been led to believe anyway.
I recently bought a number of pieces of very well seasoned lime sitting there waiting attention. If anybody's wants some lime to try some carving, I've got some.
Sounds like a good idea. Yeah, lovely stuff.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Peter. And I will remove you from the spotlight now. And I'm going to try and unmute everybody. In fact, I can't, can I? I can't unmute everybody. So if you want to give a round of applause to Peter at this stage, then please unmute yourself in the next 10 seconds and start applauding.
Very good.
you very much, Peter.
Thank you. Thank
So,
you.
our next speaker is Martin. There we go.
There we go.
This is Martin. This is his beautiful face. Martin, if you'd introduce yourself, please, and over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's nice to see a lot of familiar faces there. So probably in some respects, don't need an introduction. But anyway, for those who don't know me, quick history. I started turning in 2004. Joined Herts Beds immediately, which was about 5 minutes from where I lived, which was splendid. I ended up as chairman, and I can't remember if that was 2007 or 2008, because nobody else wanted to do it. And then I stood down in 2016 because my plan was to come back to Kent, which is where I was born. It took till 2017, moved to Whitstable, which is where I'm speaking to you from now. And my local club is Garden of England Woodturners. And kind of history is starting to repeat itself. I find myself back on the committee. I'm doing a newsletter, running the Zoom meetings. But hey, I must, must be a glutton for punishment. As regards tonight, the relevant bit is that I'm a former chemist. And I spent most of my life, professional life, as what I'd call a practical materials technologist. I started out doing R&D for a dyestuffs company. Then I did R&D for coatings for metal cans. I did a long stint with De La Rue, the security printer, working on everything from banknotes, checks, passports, ID cards. And finally, I ended up running my own printer cartridge business before I retired. But the common thread through all that was looking at the application and adhesion and durability of inks and coatings, how materials combined and how they interacted, what worked, what didn't, how it didn't, why it didn't, that sort of thing. So literally, I have professionally watched paint dry and found it jolly interesting. So equally well, so I've watched demos over the years. I sort of came to realise demonstrators and audiences alike don't really have that much knowledge of finishing materials. And arguably, why should you? What you want to do is turn most of the time. And the same questions get asked over and over. And I won't name names, but demonstrators so often don't know what they're talking about and they blag it. And that doesn't do anybody any good. And some of them do some very strange material combinations, which suggests they don't really know what they're doing. So the aim for tonight is to try and break away from that simple, can I put X over the top of Y? Because that means you've got to remember what the answer is. And that's why the question keeps coming around. Instead, what I'll try and do is just a little bit of why, so that when you get issues, maybe you can work it out for yourselves. At the same time, I'm not going to do a chemistry lesson. I'm long out of chemistry. But anyway, I'll try and give you a few, if you like, rules along the way, but I'll also show you how you can break them as well. So I'm just going to share my screen now, hopefully, and off we go. Right, let me see if I can get rid of this. Okay. Okay, right, so finishes will change the appearance or they'll change the feel of your wooden surface. and they'll protect a surface, and that might be from abrasion, scuffing, UV, major threat to the longevity of your pieces, water, moisture, damp, or it might be chemicals. You know, be that you know, oils for salads, for example. But you have to kind of think about what you're making and what you're going to do with it. So what's in a can of anything? And it's usually these in various combinations. You've got some sort of what we'll call a resin or a vehicle or a binder, which is the sort of the gloopy bit that holds everything together. You'll have solvents in there of some sort. It might just be water, but organic solvents as well. Dyes, which are soluble colours, pigments, which are solid particles suspended, and then a whole raft of other stuff potentially. You see there other resins which will affect the properties of the coating, stuff to stop it foaming, things to make it dry, lubricants, things that affect the gloss. So yeah, formulation is a real art in itself. I'll mention kind of drying and curing here. Drying essentially is getting rid of solvent, but it doesn't mean that the resin bit is then forming a coating. That's the curing bit, and it takes time. So you want to be careful a lot of the time. It's kind of trying to force dry stuff. You may do one without the other. You may start a curing reaction while there's still solvent in there, which will weaken the film. Or you may just drive off the solvent and think it's dry, but actually it isn't. Yeah. Okay. So just for tonight, I mean, you know, obviously time is an issue. I'm just going to skim through these as the main classes, if you like, of coatings that you know you and I deal with. So you've got your sanding sealers, you know, and we all use different ones. Personally, I'm more a fan of acrylics these days, but you can use cellulose, stick a bit of melamine resin over the top of that, wax over the top of that. I don't really use shellac at all, but you know that's just down to the work I do. Lacquers and varnishes is everybody will tell you there's differences between the two, but that tends to be industry specific. So you can really get kind of tied up in, I mean, it's semantics really. At the end of the day, they're both typically clear coatings, and they're often part of a multi-layer system, by which I mean you wouldn't apply them necessarily direct to the wood, but maybe over a sanding sealer. You might put a different sort of lacquer or a wax over the top. I like acrylics these days because the compatibility is generally very, very good. It's not as if you're locked into one manufacturer's system. I'm going to mention stains because increasingly I use those. So the characteristics of those are typically they're low viscosity, a lot of solvent in there, so that you get penetration into bare wood. But there is a bit of resin or binder in there, because otherwise, once the thing dried, you'd just be left with a powder, which would rub off, and you know, patently that's not the case. Two main types are solvent-based ones, and they're usually alcohol-based. So that would be something like chestnut products, spirit stains, or you can go water-based. So Liberon, and Hampshire Sheen's intrinsic colours are water-based. They've claimed the water-based ones raise the grain a bit. So I don't use them, so I don't know. This is just a slide to show, this is the chestnut range, and it shows a couple of things really, which is that you can't use finishes really to hide bad turning or bad finishing and sanding. And also it shows how you get a differential sort of wicking into the wood. So it's a bit of ash, hasn't been sanded or anything. You still see the saw marks in it. And you can see how that picks up extra stain. So if you've done some turning with some torn grain and sanded it very well, then it's going to highlight those. So don't think that by putting a stain on you're gonna cover up a flaw, because you won't. Right, oils. Oils is a huge area. There are lots of different sorts of oils, and we could very easily get into a serious chemistry lesson, which I quite frankly am not prepared for, and you know, I don't think any of us want to get into. But the significance of including them is that you use it in a slightly different way. You always want to use oils straight onto the wood. Don't apply them over a sanding sealer. The idea is that the oil penetrates into the wood. And you can build up the coats to adjust your gloss level. They're a sort of softer finish than some of the lacquers. And I like them personally. The gloss is a bit softer and to my mind more natural. And then you can adjust the gloss level again with waxes, which is what's next. So fair range of waxes out there. I mean, they'll add slippiness, so there's a tactile side to it, and a bit of gloss, and protection, because they'll increase the knock resistance. They come solid or kind of semi-solid, and there's usually a bit of solvent in there to just to let them move a bit. I mean, things like carnauba and microcrystalline waxes you can use from a solid stick, or beeswax, of course, from a solid stick. But a bit of solvent in there to ease it is, you know, is quite common. And you can also blend in pigments or powders to give yourself a coloured wax. So liming wax, obviously, is the old sort of traditional one. You can find, what have I got? I've got a black wax, sort of patinating wax, if you like. Verdigris wax, which is sort of green. And Hampshire Sheen actually puts some iridescent pigments into there, so that's their embellishing waxes, which are, you know, can be quite sort of funky, if that's your thing. You can build up multiple coats, and you can apply to bare wood or over any other finish. I have to say, at the moment, I'm quite a fan of Chestnut's cut and polish, which is an abrasive and a wax combination. So I don't know if any of you use that, but basically you sand to sort of 240 grit, put this stuff on. It's a sort of like a pumice, so it will sand your wood, but it will then get finer and finer as it's ground down, until eventually it loses its abrasion and you're just left with the wax, and then you can wax over the top. So that's currently my new favourite finish, for speed, if nothing else. Right, we'll talk about some of the rules are made to be broken, as they say. But this is kind of good sense, if you like. So give things time to dry or cure. It pays off in the end. I mean, some demonstrators will try and hurry things up with, you know, a hot air gun or a hairdryer or something. Quite often ends in tears. I mean, Ed Oliver's quite a good friend of mine now. He's a member of Garden of England. I don't know if any of you watch Ed's demos on a Saturday morning, but yeah, he will wing it and quite often over wings it, shall we say. So yeah, you know, for those of us in our workshops doing things in our own time, give stuff time to dry, and it'll pay dividends. It's a good general rule not to mix systems. So if you've used an acrylic sanding sealer, put a water-based acrylic lacquer over the top. If you're using oils, use probably just one oil. Probably no reason to mess about with them, putting more than one on, even if you use multiple coats. And don't put oils on over a sanding sealer, because the idea is the oil penetrates the wood. Waxes you can put over most finishes. And normally you wouldn't try and put a finish over wax, but there is an exception, which I'll kind of show you in a minute. In terms of breaking the rules, I'm saying keep a system. This is a question that actually comes up a lot. People say, you know, in my experience anyway, you know, I've got a cellulose sanding sealer. Do I have to put something like a melamine over the top, or can I put a water-based system? And the answer is you can put either. And the reason for that is it works if you've let the cellulose dry properly. If there's any residual solvent, that will attack the acrylic that you put over the top and screw up your finish. If you go the other way around, if you put down a water-based acrylic sanding sealer and you then put a solvent-based lacquer over the top, like melamine, for example, the solvents in there will attack, and they'll chew up your water-based base coat. So, you know, in a lot of ways, the simpler you keep it, the better, but you avoid problems if you let things dry properly. Another no-no is putting things over wax. However, it does seem that you can put an acrylic lacquer over a gilt wax. That was definitely kind of counterintuitive to me. And somebody raised that question with Terry Smart of Chestnut, and he wasn't keen either. You know, in sense he wouldn't guarantee it, but the way we sort of rationalised it is that it's actually so little wax. And this was an instance where somebody had rubbed gilt wax into the grain and then cleaned it back. You've actually got so little wax there that the acrylic will just about hang together over the top. But you are, long term, you are maybe compromising how good that top coat is. So really, the answer is it's whatever works for you. If it works, don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. But if it goes wrong, then kind of go back to the basics. Look at what you're doing. You know, are you trying to put solvents onto an acrylic system which is a bit solvent susceptible? It's a good start to go to look at the Chestnut products compatibility chart, which I mean I know has come up before, and it gets mentioned in the newsletter fairly regularly. And Terry Smart also does a weekly newsletter you can sign up to, where, you know, real world finishing problems get aired every week, and they've got there's an archive on the website as well. So, you know, there's a lot of help out there these days for sorting out your finishing problems. I mean, this is this I thought was a brilliant case in point. I don't know whether any of you watched Kirsty Dalton on Conkers Live a few weeks back. I mean, she was new name to me. It was her first demo. She had 400 people watching, so it was a bit of a baptism of fire. Relatively new wood turner, but she's got a degree in fine art. And because she hasn't been doing this stuff very long, she doesn't know the rules. So basically, you know, follows her instinct. And what she was doing was putting on rub and buff, which is sort of like a gilt wax, on the inside of her bowls, and then painting on iridescent and metallic paints. Well, you know, from everything I just said, you shouldn't put an acrylic paint over the top of a wax, but it works. And essentially what she does is that the paint dries, it doesn't stick to that wax particularly well, but as you buff it, the dried paint sort of goes back almost to a powder, which then becomes incorporated into the wax. So she gets these really nice sort of blended colours, you know, in a gilt wax. So it was quite refreshing to watch, I must say, and so it just proves that you don't have to follow the rules. So that's the sort of that's a skim through. What I just thought I'd do is show you just a few of the bits that I do, and kind of show you how I mean, basically I do work within the rules, but it still gives you plenty of scope. So this is a bit of scorched oak. And the top one, I've rubbed in some gold gilt wax, and in the bottom one, I've just dry brushed gold acrylic paint. So on the top one, the gold or the metallic is getting into the grooves, and in the bottom one, the gold is sitting on the highlights. So it's similar, but you know, different. It's sort of variations on a theme. And these are some of this is some of the stuff I've been doing, yeah, probably for a couple of years now. So the top left, that's a background of spirit stains. It's been textured with a Proxim grinder. Then black acrylic paint in all the dips, iridescent paints into the dips, sand it back to give me a clean wood surface again, and then spirit stains. And if you're careful how you put the spirit stain on, it won't lift the acrylic paint. But it gives, you know, it's quite a striking effect. And actually I sold that one today. So, you know, that one's now gone. Top middle, that's stained, that's scorched, lightly scorched, scrubbed, stained, lots of different colour stains and rubbing back, and then gilt wax into the grain. Top right is black spirit stain applied, and then iridescent paint, and then sanded back. So it gets you back to the wood, but sort of dark iridescent grain there. Bottom left, that's iridescent paint, again, into very lightly scorched, I think that was ash, might be an oak, can't remember. And again, stains, yeah, bottom middle, more gilt wax over stain, and bottom right is stains and rubbing back. And then I'll just finish off with these. And these again have all found new homes this week, I'm delighted to say. But same sort of variations on the theme. It's using a Dremel and various ball cutters to create little semi-hemispherical dimples. black stain or paints, iridescent paint, rub it back and stain. The top right was is oak, and that's a kind of colouring technique which didn't really fall into the categories I did. That's homemade ebonizing. Basically, I wanted to do a bowl that looked like it'd been just dug out of a bog after 500 years. So it's a wormy old bit of oak, but that's had ebonizing solution, which is vinegar and wire wool, several applications of that, and black wax, and yeah, it looked old. Bottom right was stained black and then dry brush metallics on the edges to bring up the sort of metallic looking detail, and the thing in the middle was an entry in our Easter egg competition this year. So a nicely stained egg, just stains rubbed together and blended, and then gilt wax, and the base of the little nest was scorched, stained, and dry brushed with gold acrylic paint. I basically the challenge was an enhanced egg cup. And somebody said to me, "Oh, well, it's you're going to use iridescent paints, you're going to use texturing, so yes, I took them at their word, and so it's got all of that, and it's I have to say that's fairly strongly influenced by Emmett Kane. If you've seen any of his work, it's the cocktail stick thing. So there we go. Sort of a quick canter through. The main types of coating you'll come across and why things sometimes go wrong. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Martin. I'm going to ask a question first while everybody else thinks, if they may, but before I do that, I'll share with you something that I did once, which you've highlighted why it's not a very good idea to do so. I put a shellac friction polish over a piece which had previously been oiled, although it was dry. And the result of that was about a week later, it developed dandruff, is the only way I can describe it, as everything flaked off. Yeah. And of course, by then it was too late to refinish it. So it really is worth thinking about the sequence and what you put on. I know that from experience. I have a question for you though. Have you ever made your own formulations, or do you always buy somebody else's?
To be honest, I mean, apart from the the ebonizing goo, which is just a jam jar that I occasionally top up with white vinegar or steel wool, old nails, whatever. No, I mean I'll buy proprietary stuff. I mean, there's not much you can do with something like certainly a lacquer. There are, like I said, the whole list of additives, minor things that can be in there, which make the lacquer work or make it work better. Just to form a good film. I mean, it's almost, we kind of take that. By the time it reaches us, all the problems have been ironed out. But a lot of you start from a base resin. I mean, it's what I used to do for a living. Was develop, was formulation work. So you start with the resin. You can't put the resin on because it's too thick on its own. So then you put some solvent in. Well, which solvent do you use? And chances are you need a blend of solvents because some of the solvents are expensive. So you'll use the expensive one a bit. And then you'll use the cheaper one to kind of bulk it out a bit. And then probably you might need a lubricant in there. And you've got to work, and that's fractions of a percent. You wouldn't want to go there making your own. It's a long old job. My projects used to last for weeks, and it was basically trial and error. You picked your way through. You worked out what ratios of different resins you wanted. Which lubricant, how much lubricant. Adjusted the You know, viscosity had to be right. So, you know, you're then fiddling around with the solvent blend. Yeah, and you know, and so it goes. So no, buy the stuff off the shelf. It will be my recommendation. Wax is a bit different. You can, you know, as I explained with Kirsty's stuff, you know, you can fiddle around yourself. You know, to take a little bit of wax. You know, put anything from, I don't know, you know, copy a toner in there. If you want a red wax, put a bit of you know, magenta toner in there. And kind of grind it in, you know, sort of mortar and pestle job. You can do it, you know, or sort of, you know, some of the glittery stuff that you'll find in an art shop, you know, but equally well, all these things are out there, kind of already formulated for you. So yeah, I don't do much DIY chemistry in inverted commas anymore.
Martin, you spoke about oils. What is
Yeah.
your go-to oil? Is it lemon oil? Is it Danish oil? Is it what finishing oil is your favorite?
Yeah, let's see. Well, today's Tuesday, so today my favourite oil is, you know, it's a bit like that. I like lemon oil because it basically looks like there isn't a finish on there. You know, it's quite matte. But it isn't particularly durable. I suppose of the oils that dry, I mean, chestnut finishing oil I quite like, but more than a couple of coats of that and it's all starting to look a bit glossy for me. So, you know, that I've got reservations there. I don't mind a bit of hard wax oil sometimes. I didn't mention those specifically, but, you know, it like it literally says on the tin, it's a mixture of oil and wax. So you don't need any wax over the top of that. Coat or two of that. Yeah, Richard Finley's a big fan. I mean, chestnut finishing oil is a kind of Danish oil. It's just that I know Terry is sensitive about not calling it Danish oil. Whereas, yeah, you know, Danish oil's very, very similar. But the thing to do is I think, again, like I said before, you know, stick to just one. If you want to just if you want a bit more gloss, well, maybe, you know, put another coat on and build it. Yeah, so I mean, it doesn't, you know, there is no one favourite. I will fiddle about a bit and use different things on different pieces. Sorry, it's about best I can do.
That's fine, thank you. It seems to me as though you've got one for Monday, one for Tuesday, one for Wednesday, one for Thursday, etc.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, if I want a piece, if I've done very often I've done a sort of fairly distressed bit of wood, and say I want it really not to look like it's had much done to it, that it still looks like a pretty raw bit of wood. Then lemon oil is quite good for that, you know, because it's a virtually matte finish, but it feels lovely. It's lovely and slippy. But say some people like a lot of gloss. So, you know, maybe I probably wouldn't even use oil at all if I really wanted a high gloss. You know, you're probably more into a lacquer of some sort. You know, yeah, it's down to taste.
Hi Martin, it's Graham.
Hi Graham.
Hi, so I don't use oils that much because I find that I want to get a finish that's done fairly quickly. But if you do use, if I get into oils, then how many coats would you recommend I put on?
Well, I mean, with lemon oil is really thin, really low viscosity. So, I mean, to be honest, I like to give stuff a really good dunk in it. Let it dry and then wipe off the excess. You know, and overnight that'll pretty. I mean, you know what food safe finish is like. I mean, that kind of stays around for quite a long time. Lemon oil is a little bit like that. You know, but more slippy. Feels more slippy. But yeah, the rest of the oils. I mean, you're looking at drying overnight, and I rarely go more than 2 coats. and even at 2, I tend to start worrying that the wood's start to look a bit plastic. So if I can get away with 1, then I will, but 2 is a max.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. I guess looks like your pop-up shop's working really well anyway.
Well, yeah, it's hard work this time round.
Yeah.
You know, apparently there's been a pandemic on or something. So people are a bit scared to come in, but yeah, no, we're doing all right. We're doing all right.
Do you use mineral oils?
So in effect, food safe finish. Is that what you're saying, Ben? Yeah. Yeah, a little bit. If I really don't want anything, if I really want a piece not to look like it's got anything on it, then that's probably the answer.
Yeah.
And obviously it's for a food safe item. You know, then that's your only option. I don't know if, I think lemon oil is one of those things that I think Terry thinks is pretty much food safe, but he hasn't had the testing and the accreditation done. So yeah, if I'm doing something that is a bowl that I think is going to be used, then I'd use food safe finish rather than lemon oil. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Sometimes I use just baby oil because that's the same, but it's just got a perfume in it, and it's actually quite nice. If it's not going to be used for food.
Yeah. I mean, having said that, probably baby oil is also food safe.
Yeah, but it's not been passed as
It's not been passed. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But it gives a workshop a nice smell.
Bless you.
I've got a technical question for you. I made if you were to make a cheese board, like a platter of some description, and then it's going to be used for putting cheeses on it, which are greasy. Therefore, how would you finish that with an oil, and how would you then make sure the wood doesn't stain once the cheeses come off it after a night's worth of merriment?
Yeah, I would probably try and avoid using any finish at all, to be honest, because at least then you can give it a good old scrub in the washing up bowl and you know, rinse it, pat it dry. Yeah, the only thing I would use there would be foods, you know, mineral, as Ben's saying, food safe finish. I mean, I've got a feeling that Martin Saban-Smith's Danish oil has been accredited as being food safe now. But the problem is when you've got a finish, which is a film, if you then damage that, and let's face it, with a cheese knife, the chances are you're going to score through that. If you get moisture underneath, that then gets trapped under there, and it's going to look bad, and probably the oil is going to kind of lift, and potentially you're going to start growing things under there. So yeah, if I was going to put anything on at all I'd put on is a mineral oil, like food safe finish.
Thank you.
But I mean, I have to say, Malcolm, I'll qualify that by saying very little of what I make is useful. I don't make anything that's functional at all, really. So I may not be the right person to ask for that.
Martin.
Yeah.
Many years ago, I did a course with Tobias Kay down in Devon, and for all plasters that he used to make and everything for food, he always used liquid paraffin. Yeah, yeah. Because that was food safe.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's you know, it goes under different names. You know, it's mineral.
Mineral.
Yeah, food safe finish, mineral oil. Yeah, it's all the same stuff. Yeah. That's it. You know, it's inert. It's not going to. I mean, I didn't even talk about vegetable oils and the fact you shouldn't use them because chances are they'll go sort of rancid if you're making utility wear. Whereas you know, mineral oil is pretty kind of inert to everything. So yeah, it's good and safe.
Are there any more questions for Martin? Or any more experiences? I admitted to doing it wrong a couple of times there. Anybody else had some mistakes they'd like to share?
No, I know some of these gentlemen, Adam. They won't have made mistakes.
Yeah, of course not, no. Okay, so thank you very much, Martin. And I'll say what I said about Peter. I much appreciated your efforts this evening. And if everybody wants to come off mute and give Martin a quick round of applause, that would be lovely.
Well done.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so I guess it's any other business before I attempt to wrap up the meeting. Does anybody have anything they want to share with anybody this evening? Have you made something spectacular that you've got in your hands and you're gagging to show us, or anything like that before we wrap up?
The only thing that I've turned of any interest that I've not seen the wood available commercially is ginkgo biloba, and I'm probably butchering the pronunciation. Have any of you turned any ginkgo? My mother-in-law, again, anyone who now knows that I turn wood has gone, Barry, I've got this log, let me sling it in the back of the car for you. So this thing turned up last weekend, still very wet, having come down on Boxing Day. So I've thrown it on the lathe. It's a soft wood and it's rather uninspiring in terms of its grain structure, but I thought nothing ventured, nothing gained, so I thought I'd give it a go. So I'm trying to dry it out now. Has anyone microwaved any wood to increase the drying time or reduce the drying time?
Not that I've bit.
Yes.
Yes, Barry. This is Adam. I do it all the time.
Okay.
I do, and the only wood I would recommend that you don't do it with is yew,
Yes. Because
I've had that explode in the microwave on me, because it seems to have quite large pockets of wood in it for some reason. Oak goes well, ash goes well, and the secret is really, well, I also have an Arga. Okay. So what I tend to do is I rough turn it.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the microwave for maybe a minute and a half on full until it's just too hot to hold, and then leave it by the Arga and let it cool down slowly.
Right.
And then I'll do that 2 or 3 times, and by the time you've done that, it reduces in weight by at least 20%.
Okay.
Generally, and that's quite rapid. And I'm going to say 2 out of 3 don't split.
Right.
That you do lose a bit that way, but it is quite an effective way of doing it.
Okay. I think I might need to leave mine a little longer because I've only been putting in for 30 seconds at a time. I don't think it gets hot enough. So I'll give that a go.
Well, actually, my comment would be that I do the same as Adam. I use the microwave, quite a lot for smallish pieces and then rough turn first. But I don't let it get as hot as Adam is suggesting.
Right.
And the 30 seconds is closer to mine. But you just have to increase the number of cycles. I mean, I would put it in for 30 or 40 seconds until it's barely warm, really. Then I just stand it aside and go about my business for the day. And then later on in the day, I'll stick it in again for the same short period of time. I might do that over a few days. And I reckon I get a better than 70% success rate on it. It just needs a little bit more time, perhaps.
Sure.
To let it happen.
Thank you.
It does work.
That's helpful.
If you're married, don't do it when your wife's in.
I waited for her to go out
as well. Yeah, good point.
I did wait for her to go out this afternoon. She came back. What's that sitting on the side? Oh, it's just drying out.
Yeah.
Well, what sort of for those sort of drying regimes, what sort of size of bowl or vessel, and what sort of wall thickness are we talking about?
Well, I mean, for me, I tend to do that sort of 10% business. That, if you are reducing something and expecting it to warp, then you leave at least 10% width on the rim.
Yeah.
And that's my default anyway. So it's still relatively thick, but the big meat of it has gone, certainly.
I'm going to be slightly more precise than that, I think, Peter. And I'd say that if the thickness of the bowl is 15% of the diameter of the bowl, then you're probably about right, because you get quite a lot of distortion when you dry it that quickly as well. And I, just looking roughly at a ruler here, if I had a typically my bowls are about 200 mil, and I'd go for a 20 mil thickness as rough turn before I started to dry them out. And generally they're a bit wobbly, and you'll end up taking, I'll end up taking at least 25, maybe 50% of that thickness off because of the warping.
Right. If you were drying something slower, so I mean, I've got this oak that's currently, I've got 5 half-turned bowls buried in the shavings underneath the lathe at the moment, waiting to go somewhere else. How long would that typically take to season down to something where it'd be more able to be finished?
Who are you asking?
Anyone. The brain trust that we have in front of us.
If you leave them out about 6 months in the sawdust, and don't forget to take them out and shake them around a little bit, and then take them out and put them on a shelf somewhere cool, preferably low down in your workshop for a few months, and that should do you.
All right.
Yeah.
I personally don't know how long that would take, because I've never had the patience to wait that long. But I don't know. I know.
Yeah.
I know that some members have talked to me about weighing the piece and then doing some calculations around the weight. And I think somebody's on the call who's currently doing that with some rough turn bowls.
I don't know if it's somebody else you're talking about, but certainly I weigh, but there's no calculation involved. I just do a simple graph, and then when the curves start to get relatively flat, then that's when I say it is as dry as the surrounding. And I mean, there is no dry anyway, is there? There is nothing defined. All you're doing is getting the same moisture level as the surrounding. But I just draw a gentle graph, and I enjoy. I sound a bit tedious, but I enjoy drawing the graph, and I enjoy seeing the weight of it. So that's all. You're just using the weight as an indication of how wet it is.
Moisture content, right?
I don't like to buy wood. I suppose I ought to say that. That's the thing that drives me. I don't particularly like to buy wood.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat.
Yeah.
Thank you. There we go. So, oh, crikey. Okay, so thank you very much to Martin and Peter. It just remains for me to give you a quick update. I think I'm going to give you a quick update just for 2 minutes, because we had a committee meeting recently and we talked about reopening at Adeyfield. So I'm just going to say that all we decided there was that the earliest possible date would be the 13th of July. So please pencil that into your diaries. If you do, one of the things we were also talking about was the health and safety side of things. So we're not absolutely sure that the 13th of July will go ahead. There will be a conversation with the team at Adeyfield who run the place. Sorry, I can't remember the chap's name. And subject to that, we'll be confirming via a newsletter exactly what will be happening and when. So try and look forward to that. But in the meantime, the other conversation we had was talking, and I'm afraid I raised this one, talking about socializing outside of the club, because it occurred to me as now I'm the new treasurer, I'm the custodian of the membership list, or that's part of my role. And as custodian of that list, I was checking out members' addresses to make sure that we got them, that we had them correct. And as part of doing that, I put them into a map, and it occurred to me that an awful lot of us live just around the corner from each other. So it's quite a tight geographic spread we have. And when we were talking about it, I personally have visited maybe half a dozen other people in the club, either to share a tool or to make something with them, or to pick up a piece of wood that they were offering, or to get their help with making something. And part of the conversation we were having was about how the club might want to use that sort of contact between ourselves. So we'll be talking to you about that when we go live, hopefully in July, a little bit further, and seeing if we can't help people to, maybe get a little bit more out of the club via that route. Okay.